yes, we are.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you, honourable members, for joining me for this meeting of the Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. My name is Andrikus van der Westhuizen, privileged to be the chair of this committee. And then we have on our agenda today a briefing by the Department of Agriculture, but we've also invited the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning and experts in the field of water consumption management to share with us the situation in the Western Cape, the challenges, and just to share a lot of information on what the departments are doing in order to address the challenge of climate change and the challenge of feeding more and more people with the limited water that we have available. I'm just quickly going to give all the members present an opportunity to introduce themselves. And again, thank you very much. I see we are indeed quorate. Over to you, honourable members.
I'm Peter Murray, Freedom Front Plus.
Good afternoon, Chair. I'm Derek America. I'm a member of the committee.
Good afternoon, Matlodi Maseko, standing in for Kayla Myron.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and officials. It's Sean August, member of the committee.
Good, thank you very much. My apologies, Honourable Maran.
Good afternoon, Chair, and everyone present. Pat Maran, member of this committee.
Good, thank you very much. Honourable members, we have a number of items also to deal with at the end of our meeting. I'm referring to minutes and quarterly reports, etc. But for now, I would like to also give an opportunity to the head of department to please introduce his team. I haven't seen his name, and I don't know if it's one of his deputies that will be introducing the team.
Good morning, Chairperson, or good afternoon. I just want to check, can you hear me clearly?
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I will be leading our delegation, Chairperson, as Daryl Jacobs, Deputy Director General. I would like Aisha Peterson and Peter Quake just to introduce themselves quickly. They should be on the call.
Good afternoon. I'm Asia Peterson and from the Department of Agriculture. Thank you.
Good day, Chairperson and committee. My name is Peter Quake. I'm the Chief Engineer with the Department of Agriculture.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much.
Also part of our delegation are colleagues from the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. If I can ask them just to introduce themselves quickly.
Mr. Arendse, are you going to do the honours?
Yes, good afternoon, Chairperson and members of the Standing Committee, our colleagues from Agriculture. Thanks for the invite. I'm Gottlieb Arendse. I'm Chief Director Environmental Quality. Within our portfolio linked to water is the pollution management aspects. And I have two colleagues which will also introduce themselves who work with the pollution, especially water quality monitoring. So we haven't got a presentation, but we will provide any questions or actually respond to any questions, Chairperson, related to our mandate. Thank you. Over to Zaid and then Molly.
Good afternoon, Chair and members and the Department of Agriculture. My name is Zaid Brown from the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning within Pollution and Chemicals Management.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marley Kunneke, also from the Directorate Pollution and Chemicals Management and working on especially water quality monitoring. Thanks.
Good, thank you very much, and a warm welcome to you as well. And then,
thank you, Chair. Yeah, can I continue?
Are there other?
Yes, there are other members. We're also joined by colleagues from the Department of Local Government. If I can ask them to introduce themselves. I'm not sure if they're on the call already. And if they're not on the call yet, Chair, they will be joining in. They've undertaken to. We've also included representatives from the Department of Water and Sanitation. We've invited them. Can I just check? Are they already on the call? It appears not, Chair. So for now, we're going to. This is the team, but we will be joined by colleagues from Water and Sanitation as well as the Department of Local Government. Thank you, Chair.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs. Mr. Jacobs, thank you very much also for forwarding the presentation in advance to us. Honourable members, it's quite a big presentation and you had to download it via the link provided. I do hope that you were able to download it. But if not, Mr. Jacobs, who will be leading the presentation?
Thank you very much, Chair. If I can ask Mr. Quake to upload it and share it with everybody, and then the formal presentation will be done between myself, Aisha Peterson, and Peter Quake. If I can ask Mr. Quake to upload it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I will share my screen.
Oh, wonderful. There it is, Mr. Quake. Perhaps you might just want to, that's it, put it into presentation mode. Thank you. You're welcome to proceed.
Thank you very much. If we can move to slide 1. And it's really just a broad introduction, Chairperson. So there's no doubt. And as we thank you for the opportunity to share some of the issues relating to water management, I want to reiterate the point that water continues to be identified as a provincial risk. We know that climate change has caused changes in rainfall patterns and variability. However, we believe, Chair and members, that innovation and technology is key to mitigating this risk. What we're hoping to do through this presentation is to highlight the department's response to the risk and the mitigation and adaptation measures to sustainably manage water resources from source to point. We also believe that irrigation agriculture contributes significantly to job creation and agricultural exports to the province. And as a result, we want to make the point that the management of water availability and quality has a direct impact on food security. If we can go to the next slide. The outline of the presentation before I hand over to Aisha Peterson is to cover issues of water governance and water management institutions, to look at agricultural water use and risks to water security, focus briefly on the Smart Agri Plan and response to climate change. And sorry, I just remember that Dr. Stephanie Midgley is also part of our team. She's our climate change champion. I think she should have joined the call by now as well. In terms of river protection works, we'll focus briefly on that. We approach the invasive alien clearing. We look at water losses from dams and conveyance systems, irrigation systems and water use efficiencies. We look at some of the irrigation scheduling technologies. There's a brief report from the Water Indaba as requested by the committee, and then we will summarize and conclude. Thank you very much, Chair. I now want to hand over to Aisha Peterson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Thank you, Chair. Water governance, can we have the next slide? So the 1990 Act, Water Act, yeah, I'm just making sure everyone can hear me, governs water resource management and water use. Prior to that, we had the 1956 Act. And with the new Act, it makes provision for water, for different water governance institutions. And one of these institutions are catchment management agencies, and they've got functions that's delegated to them that is within the National Water Act. And then we also have basically underwater catchment management agencies, we've got the water user associations. So it makes provision for that. And it's to establish new water user associations in areas where there hadn't been existing irrigation boards or any other water institution, management institution before. And also then for the transformation of irrigation boards, existing irrigation boards into water user associations. So the Brede Gourits Catchment Management Agency was established in 2005. At that stage, there had been 9 water management agencies. Under the new legislation or new gazette in 2022, the Berg Olifants, which was going to be the 2 catchment management agencies in the Western Cape, were amalgamated in 2022, and they will form 1 catchment management agency. So on the right of the screen, you'll see the structure where the Department of Water and Sanitation has a national representation, and they've got a regional, provincial, regional offices in each province, and they interact with us at provincial level through the various provincial departments as well as through local government. And you'll see that basically the catchment management, there's an interface between local government and water user catchment management agencies because it's at a local government level, and as well as the Overberg Water Board, which is also, other than taking care of water resource management, also does water provisioning in that area for both farmers as well as towns. And then we've got, so at the local government level, you compare a water services authority, and that is your catchment management forums, and the water user association, you can equate that as the water services provider, basically. And that's the structure of water governance within the legislation. I want to emphasize here that this is basically the mandate, or based on the legislation, the National Water Services Act. It's water functioning, provisioning, as well as water quality management is a function between the Department of Water and Sanitation and the local government, which is the Water Services Authority. Thank you. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. So what makes the water services, the National Water Act different from the 1957 Act is the fact that it allows for ecological water requirements, and it became mandatory in the 1998 Act. And what's a challenge is that water resources had been allocated fully or even close to completely allocated, to being completely allocated. So in some areas they were over allocated, and other areas they were close to being being fully allocated. So to deal with this, Water Affairs gazetted water resource quality objectives in order to benchmark and improve the condition of the ecosystem to make sure that it doesn't deteriorate any further. And emphasize on this slide is the fact that water in the province, water for the agriculture sector in 3 of the 4 catchments has a higher percentage than urban and industrial use in the area. So in the Olifantsdoorn catchment, the Brede River catchment, as well as in the Gourits River catchment, the water composition, 90% of it is allocated to agriculture. I want to emphasize here that the reason the percentages are high because most of the water resources are found in the rural areas where irrigation farming takes place. Thank you. Next slide. So the water availability is really dependent on climate and weather. So there's no guarantee that we will have rainfall. And as mentioned earlier on, climate change impacts on the rainfall and its variability. So the Central Karoo and Klein Karoo is characterized by extreme drought and flood events. We've seen that a month ago that Ladysmith Lanesburg was again flooded, and areas around the Lanesburg area was experienced heavy floods. Whereas in the southern and western parts of the province, they've got a higher assurance of water supply. So the assurance of supply has a direct impact in terms of what crop mix can be planted in a sustainable way. So in the Klein Karoo, you'll note that there's annual fodder crops, lucerne mostly, whereas in the Ceres and Grabouw area, there's long-term fruit crops, your apples, your pears, that is just more sustainable. And that depends all on your assurance of supply. Next slide. Then major risk is the point and non-point source pollution. And this is mainly chemical and fecal pollution. That poses a challenge where direct abstraction takes place from river systems. And one of the major challenges here is the informal settlements that is established around a water source. And those are point source pollution, where you have these informal settlements on the water course. So what aggravates the impact of the wastewater treatment works is the overload. Sorry, let me just start again. Wastewater treatment works are impacted significantly by load shedding. And the challenge there is that there's a service failure of the sewage pump, and that's where we have point source pollution of the water quality, and that has a direct impact in terms of the water that gets abstracted by farmers downstream. To combat ecological degradation, we've invested in the clearing of invasive alien plants, and we're planning and constructing river protection works. Also, the maintenance of aging and degraded bulk water system supplies infrastructure poses an ongoing risk to water surety in the province. Next slide. An example of where the infrastructure has really failed and where there's a need for continuous investment in the infrastructure is the example of the Olifants River Water User Association. Next slide. So the Lower Olifants River Water User Association, referred to as LORWA, is responsible for the operation and maintenance of the bulk water supply scheme in the Matsikama municipal area. So that is both for domestic, industrial, as well as agricultural water supply. So this system, which is about 290 kilometers in length, is about 100 years old, and it's double its normal life expectancies. The canal provides water to 860 farms, and we have about 12,000 hectares under irrigation. It also provides water to a population of 73,000 people in the towns in the Matsikama area. And over the years, we've seen dramatic canal failures as a result of the aging infrastructure and the fact that it's double its lifetime. Can I get the next slide, please? So a major canal break took place in January in the height of the irrigation season in 2015. And 190 long length of the canal washed away and had to be rebuilt at a cost of 10 million. But it's not just the costs of rebuilding the the canal, it's also the impact that it had as a result of the breakage. So a 1.5 million land adjacent farmland adjacent to the canal was destroyed. And then during the peak of irrigation season, 300 farms and 4,300 hectares of crop under irrigation was threatened. And then 40,000 people in towns of Vredendal, Ebenezer, Papendorp, Strandfontein, and Doornbay, they were left without water. So water had to be trucked to them during that period. So during the 14-day, during the construction of the canal, there was 40 large tractors with pumps that was used to pump 40% of the water allocation to downstream users. So although there was no water restrictions in place, farmers only got 40% of the allocation. So this was, as a result of this low assurance of supply, there was about an estimated 30 million loss in terms of agricultural production. Subsequent to this break, we've invested significantly on the prevention and maintenance program with LORVA, where the department invests about, over the last 10 years, we've invested about 6 million per annum for preventative maintenance so that we don't see the loss of 40 million and we only investing 6.5 or 6 million, and we could prevent the loss of 40 million in the long term. Next slide, please. This is just picture showing of the canal we had break and the massive loss of not just the farmland, the adjacent farmland you can see, but it's also the structure, soil structure that is impacted significantly. Next one. This is the trucks that pumped 40% of the allocation, and this was full-time 24/7 during the construction phase. Next slide. This is the repaired canal. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to my colleague. Stephanie, you're on mute.
Yes, good afternoon.
We hear you now. Thank you. Please
All
proceed.
right, thank you. Could I have the next slide, please? So the Department of Agriculture and in collaboration with the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning embarked on the development of the Climate Change Response Framework and Implementation Plan for the agricultural sector. It was a 20-month project and it was concluded in March 2016. And since May 2016, it has been implemented by the Department of Agriculture with a steering committee that also incorporates staff from DEA and DP. Since then, there's been fast-track implementation, especially on some of the highlighted or priority programs in the plan. And in 2019, concluding in 2020, the plan was externally evaluated and recommendations were made for the next phase of Smart Agri. These have been taken on board by the Department of Agriculture with the Management Improvement Plan, which is now being actioned throughout the department. The implementation is across all the programs within the department, and my role is the coordination of this, and also extending to some of the other provincial government programs, for example, the Climate Change Directorate, who are also involved in this. So we are now going into the next phase of this plan. Can I have the next slide, please? So one of the key areas in the plan is in the strategic focus area 1, which is the response at farm and landscape level, making sure that the elements of production, such as soil and water, energy, and so on, are optimally used and available. So one of the key areas here, for example, is Objective 1.2, which is all about the promotion of effective, efficient and sustainable management and use of water. And I'm not going to go through all the details, but many of the actions in this particular part of the plan are already programmed within the Sustainable Resource Use and Management program of the department under the leadership of Asya Peterson. So you can see some of the things that are being done there, for example, is river protection works, the Fruitlook satellite-based platform, which is used by farmers to irrigate more efficiently, to use less irrigation water for the same amount or even more of production and value of their crops. And this has been going for, I think it's at least 8 years or longer, and is got very high uptake by the farmers across the province and is being continually improved. Yes, and then of course the clearing of invasive alien plants, which are known through science and practice now to cause a lot of losses of water in our systems. They use a lot of water, so when you clear them, it frees up water flows, and streams and rivers, the yields return to what they should be in the catchments. And this, of course, leads to more water in the rivers, but also in the dams, which are then available for irrigation. Next slide, please. So water is a very cross-cutting element of this plan, and you can see that especially when we had the big drought, 2016 to 2018, the response to this drought, there was a very concerted effort by the Department of Agriculture to provide support and to identify the risks and the priorities that need to be addressed. And what we did back then was also to overlay this on the Smart Agri Plan, being our strategy for the long term, to see what the linkages are. And it was clear that apart from the water itself and sustainable natural resource management, there was a lot also in strategic focus area 2, which is the one on the top right, disaster risk reduction and management, where the plan identifies that joint planning and response to disasters is very important, and some of the barriers that need to be resolved in order to strengthen our disaster risk reduction and relief responses when these disasters hit. Then, of course, also the social vulnerabilities came out quite strongly back during the drought, and this is also part of the plan under farm workers and other people working on farms who are at risk when we have major droughts and floods, for example, and that needs support. And the bottom left, the strategic focus area 3 is all about strategic knowledge and research management. This is where we have to look at long-term monitoring programs and databases and analysis and research that is needed. And then also translating that information into products for the sector, for the farmers, for decision makers, and making sure that they have access to the information they need when they need it. And part of that is also early warning. It needs to be strengthened. And various other efforts as well. And then on the right-hand side, the last one, strategic focus area 4, it's climate resilient production. No, I'm sorry, that's a typing error there. That is actually joint governance. So that is where government comes in, working in collaboration, in partnership with the sector, with the private sector, with the farmers and their representatives to make sure that we have a coherent joint response, making sure that we identify and assist with dealing with regulatory barriers, for example, that make it difficult for farmers to respond to climate change or to implement adaptation strategies, which are known to be effective, but regulatory barriers are making it difficult. And then communications. Next slide, please. All right, thank you.
Thank you. River protection. So this is, as my colleague has just mentioned now, one of the interventions to mitigate against the impacts of climate change. And what we've discovered that building river protection works in rivers is basically used to slow down water during a flood. So the velocity of the water that normally moves sediment downstream, that is slowed down, and it prevents the loss of significant soil, fertile soil, and which downstream then would have an impact in terms of the water availability as well as water quality. So this is an effective risk reduction measure in areas where flooding is prone. It also enhances, like I said, the soil, and it prevents further erosion. And it's a very effective way of also managing the water resources. It improves water security and it creates jobs. And like I said, it stabilizes rivers in order for it to be rehabilitated to its natural vegetation. So here we've got an example of the Genadendal River, Baviaans River in Genadendal. Currently, we're busy with this river. It goes past the Genadendal community, and the community's housing structures were impacted or were at risk as a result of the erosion that was taking place on the river banks. So it's 40 Gabion structures. We provided employment for the first phase for 55 people over 12 months. And then in terms of the next phase, will be 7 people will be employed for approximately 12 months to rehabilitate and revegetate the area. Next slide. This is an example of the Meerluskloof in Genadendal. This is a project that had been completed. Going from the left, that is what the river initially looked like, with the degradation and the degradation of the river. Once the groins were built, you can see that the river rehabilitation took place as well. And then you'll see on the slide, on the last slide, you'll see how the river is rehabilitated, and the structure is completely integrated into the natural vegetation. So in this way, with having the natural vegetation in place, with having the river protection structures in place, you don't have the bare river, which is very prone to further irrigation of the riverbanks. Sorry, erosion of the riverbanks. Next slide, please. This is more examples of the Gabion structures that has been built in the Davenoaks and in the Gamka River. Here we're busy with the Davenoaks, and all of these projects have been completed. The next slide. This is also Davenoaks, and it gives you an indication of the progress. And this one was not just the Gabions that was built, it was a weir that was also built. And this project is one of our biggest projects that we've had in the province. It's about 78 million that was spent on this Woolsloot weir. This was a big project because downstream, the Woolsloot Water User Association had almost on an annual basis had to replace the irrigation pump because of floods that came down the system. And also it had a major impact on the productive agricultural land. So as soon as a flood came through, it would eat away into the productive agricultural land. Next slide. Another example is the Buffelsjag. This is the first picture is a 2002 one, and you can see significant invasive alien clearing plants on the river banks. You can see on the second slide, 2006, the erosion of the river banks. Next slide. With the building of the groin structures in 2007, you can see immediately that the slope of the riverbank has been made smaller. Next slide. That's the structures that were built, which is our groins. And in 2008, we've had a flood event. And as I indicated, the purpose of these structures is basically to slow down the velocity of the water flow, and in that way it prevents sedimentation and eating away at the riverbank. So the slide at the bottom gives an indication of the riverbank still being intact and little erosion that had taken place. Next slide. Invasive alien clearings. So my mouth is going dry and I'm fasting, so please bear with me. So the removal of invasive alien plants we've discovered is a cost-effective and sustainable means of augmenting water supply. So if you look at the Western Cape water supply system, about 38 million cubes of water is lost through the invasive alien plants that is present in the Western Cape water supply system. And that is the 6 dams that's combined to provide the city of the metro with water, and as well as irrigation farmers on the system with water. So that 38 million cubes is equivalent to the Wemmershoek Dam, the size of the Wemmershoek Dam. So water loss could increase to 130 million per annum. And that could be equivalent to the Berg River Dam that we have. And that could be, if we are without any clearing, we could see those numbers of water losses by 2045. So the removal of the invasive alien plants is also creates jobs. It empowers community SMMEs. It reduces fire risk. It restores healthy agro ecosystems, and it builds the resilience to the impacts of climate change. Next slide. So what we do is we basically control the invasive alien plants through clearing, to having invasive alien clearing species plans on farms. We do it in collaboration with the farms that are on the riparian areas and other stakeholders like environmental NGOs. We do it with other provincial departments and national departments as well. We support farmers with the initial clearing, and then we basically provide the farmer with herbicide. And then we ensure that the river maintenance plans are in place for those farms, and farmers contribute 30% in a non-monetary value, and in some cases it is a monetary value as well. So with our current model, farmers need to put in via the Water User Association in order for them to form part of the alien clearing projects. Thank you. Next slide. This is just the mature trees that are around the riverbanks and has a massive impact on the stabilization of the riverbank. So in this case, when you have big trees like this and a flood comes through, it eats away on the riverbank and causes much erosion and further down or downstream sedimentation. Next slide. We've got, like I said, it's a job creation opportunity, especially in the rural areas where there's low, high levels of unemployment. Next slide. This is just the indicate the aerial view of what it looks like in the area where it's aliens have been cleared. You can see there's little water coming back as soon as the invasive aliens are removed. Next slide. Here you'll clearly see what it looks before and after clearing has taken place, and almost immediately after we remove the invasive alien plants that are adjacent to the river resource, you'll see that the water flow increases immediately. Next slide. This is just a number to basically a table that basically gives an indication of our investment in invasive alien plants or the hectares that we clear, and what it effectively would translate into if we look at the saving of water through invasive alien clearing, and what it would ultimately convert if we take that water that we've saved and we convert that water into a irrigating crop like citrus. And in this case, I'm going to use the highlighted 2023 slide. We've cleared almost 9,000 hectares of invasive alien plants. We've created 690 jobs, and that amounts to almost 20,000 person days. We've had 90 farmers participate, and the contribution of the farmers was about 2.3 million. And the cubic meters of water saved per hectare by the aliens that was removed was almost 7,000 cubic meters per annum. And, oh, sorry, the cubic meters saved per annum was about, no, this numbers is not making sense now. So we saved 7,000 cubic meter per hectare, and that translated into 60 million cubic meters of water. So if we translate that into that amount of water into the hectares of citrus, we would be able to plant about 6,700 hectares of citrus. And we'd be able to create almost 12,000 jobs, and we produce about 330,000 tons of citrus per year, and that would equate to about almost 3 billion in revenue just from the income of the citrus. Thank you. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions around this slide. Peter, I'll hand over to you.
I can't see my mic. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Peter.
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Water losses from dams and conveyance systems. Now, the water losses, evaporation losses from dams are quite high, and the methodologies to prevent that is actually not feasible in general. The figures there just give an indication of the evaporation that would take place in various areas in the country. In the Karoo, Beaufort West, Liugamka area, if you have a dam, you would lose 3.5 meters of water per year. And if you have, say, 2 years of that in a row, it's 7 years, 7 meters. In George, it's 2 meters. Oudtshoorn, it's 2 meters. George, 1.4 meters. Worcester, 2 meters. And Paul, almost 2 meters. And William, 2.2 meters. So we lose, and I think in the country, a lot of water through evaporation. Water losses experienced in bulk water conveyance systems are in the order of the figures there. So if we have the water in the dam, the irrigation areas is spread out downstream of the dam over long distances. One of the methodologies is to convey it by pipe conveyance systems, where water losses are in the order of 5 to 10%, depending on conditions. Concrete line canals are 15 to 35%, depending on conditions. If you have a very aged canal with poor concrete and the concrete is brittle and panels collapse, it would be higher. And if you have a sound, neat canal, as in the picture, it would be much lower. Earthline canals is generally around about 40%, but it also depends on conditions. For instance, if you have depending on the length of the canal and how porous the surrounding ground and soil material is. River conveyance is in the order of 20 to 50%. That also depends on conditions. For instance, if you have like the Berg River, which always has an element of water in it, if you put additional water In the river, the riparian zone is already saturated, so it won't be as much as compared to, say, the Gamka River in the that goes towards from the Karoo to Calitzdorp, where you have a dry river system. If you release water there, all the kuile, the depressions need to be filled, and the riparian zone need to absorb water, so the losses is much more. Irrigation systems, and then you get to the farm level, irrigation system and water use efficiencies on farm. Now, the South African Institute of Agricultural Engineers, in collaboration with industry stakeholders of the South African Irrigation Institute, developed what we call the South African Irrigation Design Guidelines, commonly referred to as the SABI norms. And the typical irrigation water use efficiencies, according to the norms, for flood irrigation is 40 to 60%. So that means you say the efficiency is 60%. That means 60% of the water applied to the field is utilized for evapotranspiration, and 40% is lost. More efficient is sprinkler irrigation or center pivot irrigation systems, which are 75% efficient. In other words, 25% water losses. Micro sprinkler irrigation is 90% efficient, and drip irrigation is 95% efficient, so only 5% losses. So one would immediately ask, but why don't we change everything to drip irrigation? But there are very specific circumstances under which these various types of irrigation systems are applicable. These considerations depend on the water quality, the chemical characteristics. For instance, we know that, just to put it in perspective, we know that water for human consumption need to be a certain standards, and it's treated by the water treatment works to meet those standards before it's being provided to the towns and the cities for domestic and industrial consumption. But in agriculture, the farmers must make the best with what they get. And in some cases, the water quality is, for instance, brackish or saline. I have high salinity levels, and that would participate on the nozzles and emitters. So if you have brackish water, you can't use micro or drip irrigation systems. Another factor, bullet 2 there, is water availability and assurance of supply. So these irrigation systems are, say the drip and sprinkler and micro are very expensive. So if you have a low assurance of supply, in other words, there's not surety that each year you will actually get your full allocation. There might be only part of, or small or nothing, like we experienced in the Klein Karoo. The appropriate technology, irrigation technology, there would be that the majority of your irrigation is actually flood irrigation. So if there's a large amount of water coming down the river, you can spread it over your fields, and you can get a good crop associated with that flood event or that water availability event. Soil characteristics also plays a role. If you have a very sandy soil, if you apply drip irrigation, the water will just kind of fall right through the soil. So there need to be a clay and loamy aspect to the soil so that the capillary action pulls the water to the side. And also crop selection plays a role, and also financial viability to the farmer. These irrigation systems are expensive. You talk about in the order of 50,000 rand per hectare for the in-field irrigation system. Just examples of irrigation systems. We start with the drip irrigation, and you can see there in the bottom picture, the lateral on the tree line and the drip emitters, the wet spots they make. in certain areas, for instance, in the citrus on the right-hand side there, they would even apply 3 drip lines because the soil is a bit sandy and to get the root zone of the tree well wetted. Example of micro irrigation, which is typically used in some of our fruit orchards. Sprinkler irrigation, water use efficiency of 75%, and pivot irrigation, which is commonly used in the Western Cape for fodder, potatoes, and also maize also for fodder mainly. An example of flood irrigation. Right, so the next area to improve water use efficiency is the aspect of scheduling. Now, scheduling is the decision of when and how much water to apply to a field. So you don't want to under irrigate and you don't want to over irrigate, because if you under irrigate, you don't get crop production. If you over irrigate, you water wastage. So the crop water use efficiency is the crop yield in kilogram per water consumption in cubic meters. So you can reduce by improving that ratio. Option 1 is by a reduction of water consumption without decrease in yield, or option 2, on the other hand, is increase yield without increasing water consumption. And your answer, the answer for a particular farmer can be anywhere in between that. So the technologies used by farmers are the following: by using a hand auger, literally digging a hole and getting a sense what's happening in the root zone. So they feel the soil, how deep the water penetrated, etc. Soil moisture tensiometers, the capacitance soil moisture probes, which measures, this is at one spot. You put the probe down a pipe and it measures the soil at 10 centimeter, 10, 20 centimeter, etc. Different depths, and you get a profile. Over the soil profile, you get a sense of the water status. Electrical resistance sensors, soil moisture neutron probes, plant sap flow measurement, and then a program the department invested in more than 10 years ago, which is now the Fruit Look project. And then the latest is remote sensing by drones. So just to give an overview of the Fruit Look, which we've been involved with for more than 10 years now. The service provider from Wageningen in Holland is Elief, and the local contractor is Blue North. So if we look at this field, just to give some to the committee some technical background. If we look at this field, everything looks the same. But if you apply the infrared image onto that, one will notice some differences. And the differences there is in the order of 2 to 3 degrees centigrade. Now, the methodology of Fruit Look is based on the surface energy balance algorithm for land, SEBAL. And what that comes down to is that all the energy sources from the sun, the radiation from the sun, radiation reflected back into space, absorbed in the atmosphere, all the energy sources, and the measurement of the infrared, which is a heat measurement, is modeled into an equation, and the only outstanding, or the difference, okay, so it's basically energy in equals energy out, and the difference in that can be attributed to evapotranspiration. For instance, if you blow on your skin, the evaporation that takes place from your skin is due to moisture on your skin that evaporates and cools down. So by modeling that into the plant physiology, they've been able to determine these 9 growth parameters for a specific field or pixel. It's in 3 sets. The one set is growth data, biomass production, cumulative biomass production, leaf area index, vegetation index, and then moisture data, actual evapotranspiration deficit, biomass water use efficiency, and then mineral data is the nitrogen content in the top leaf layer and nitrogen content all leaves. So this data sources are then updated on a weekly basis and made available on the website, and per pixel size of 10 by 10 meters. So if you have a small like food garden, which is only a few meters, it's not going to work. You need to have at least say half a hectare or larger fields to get this effect. So you get the spatial image, and then it's weekly updated, and you also get the time progress. The website looks like this. The user goes into the website, he gets a kind of Google image and identifies field as in the left bottom, and can select all the data parameters he would be interested in. And these are examples of such. And it changes the graph there. One can see how it goes up and down over time. And the Google image, you get a sense of the spatial variation in the field. So that doesn't only allow the farmer to improve his water use efficiency and scheduling, but also to optimize his crop production and input costs in terms of, for instance, if there are diseases in certain areas or weak growth, etc. So just more example, and you can compare it, say the same cultivar but different fields, so 3 different fields. Why is the one performing better than the other? And then also different years. This year compared to say a previous year, and how the impact of treatments, etc. And this is just where a farmer specifically had a nematode infestation and had to, he could address a specific part of the field and not the whole field at large. So the performance and user uptake of Fruitlook for the current season, this is at 10th of March, we had 419 users being registered. And if you go to the bottom there, for fields up to 100 hectares in size, there were 9,269 orders placed, covering 41,900 hectares. And the same people ordered from previous years that 52,600 hectares for comparative and research purposes. Okay, Asha, back to you.
Thank you, Peter. Next slide, please. So the water indaba that was held, I emphasize the need for us as a province to become more water resilient. And like we've indicated, and Mr. Jacobs has indicated in his introduction, it has been elevated to a provincial risk. And part of it is that we need, in terms of managing water, it's a collaborative approach. We need partnering between all spheres of government, and whole of society is approaches. It's critical. And as I have indicated, with the informal settlements around water courses, it requires us to really fully, in an integrated and collaborative approach, deal with those kind of challenges. We need to build resilience through the alignment of our various initiatives, and we've got various initiatives in the province. And we need to take from the lessons and learn from the lessons that we've had in the 2015 to 2018 drought, which was a 1 in 650-year drought. And that emphasized to us that climate change is real, it's here, and we need to develop preparedness for droughts and floods and other extreme events that is associated with climate change. It is important for us to implement restrictions timeously, because I think sometimes restrictions are implemented too late, and we could have prevented higher restriction levels if we had done it in a more measured way. So water metering is important, and that is associated, particularly in the municipalities, with their water losses. And make sure that the water losses or non-revenue water losses is reduced, that we need to review water tariffs, and then of course explore alternative water sources, and also looking at water storage, because currently we as a province, we significantly depend on surface water, and we haven't explored the groundwater options and reuse, recharging of aquifers. We haven't extensively utilized that options. Communication, awareness raising, and education is critical for us. The Western Cape water, like we've said early on, the invasive alien plants is 32 million cubes of water that is taken up by invasive alien plants just being in the system, and that is the size of Wemmershoek Dam. So if we just invest in removing the invasive alien plants with the buy-in of the adjacent farmers, it will make a significant contribution to making more water available in the system. Next slide. Monitoring of water supply levels and restrictions, like I've said, implement restrictions earlier. The role of water demand management and water conservation demand management. We've seen during the drought how all the citizens of the province have really made a difference and played a role in terms of the demand management and water conservation management strategies that was implemented. Agriculture is concerned with more income per drop and not just more crop per drop. So that is very critical, and Peter has emphasized that point. We needed the scheduling. He's talked these slides around scheduling. With the feasibility and balance of crop water productivity, the economics and engineering infrastructure to ensure sustainability is important, and human capital shortages in water management impacts water resilience. So one of the things is that we don't have adequate capacity at the wastewater treatment works, and as a result we have those pollution incidents in our river courses. And just additional information, the Woolsloot River feeder canal was completed and was launched the 10th of February by the Minister of Water and Sanitation. The Klein Willem Dam is underway, and the target date for completion was set April 2028. And the Berg River Fuel Augmentation Scheme project is in process, and that is also set for completion in February 2028. Mr.
Can we move to the next slide, please? So, Chairperson and members, it's clear that agricultural water use makes up the bulk allocation in 3 of the 4 catchments. We've emphasized the point that water is included in the provincial risk register. We had the Water Indaba, which brought together all stakeholders to discuss water resilience in expanding domestic, industrial, and agricultural sectors. We've recognized the impact that climate change has had on rainfall patterns, and and the impact in terms of distribution of when it rains and the variance from year to year. And we've looked at ecological infrastructure projects that are implemented to prevent water losses and degradation of the water courses. Next slide. Existing infrastructure, dams and conveyance systems contribute significantly to water losses. We've noted the point that water scheduling tools play a significant role in water optimization on farm level. Also said that agriculture uses water optimally since it's a scarce resource that has direct impact on production levels. And I want to put forward that it is a myth that irrigation agriculture wastes water. I think there's we've tried to indicate enough elements. There may be those who step out of line but are effectively dealt with. Issues of water governance legislation requires a collaborative approach to manage water quality and quantity. And at this point, Chairperson, give that call. At this point, I do want to acknowledge the presence of my colleague from Department of Water and Sanitation, Mr. Daryl Daniels. He's the Deputy Director for Institutional Establishment. And then Mr. James Harvey Ewusi and Marius Brand from Department of Local Government. That's in addition to our colleagues from Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. So I think that to a large extent confirms the collaborative approach that we have, that we are here from representing all three levels of government to collaborate around water governance legislation and the management of water quality and quantity. And I just want to close off by confirming that there are regular engagements with Department of Water and Sanitation, the water use agencies, irrigation boards, catchment management agencies, Department of Local Government and DEPI to ensure that water governance is optimized. I think Chairperson and members, was that the last slide, Peter? That is the last slide. I trust Chair and members, we've done justice to the topic that you've asked us to present on, and that you as members have a much better sense of the issues, the challenges, but also our response to those challenges with regards to water management and water quality. Thank you very much, Chair and members.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs. And certainly it was the most informative presentation for me, in any case. Mr. Jacobs, would it be in order for you if we first just hear from other colleagues whether they would like to add to your presentation before we go over to a question and answer session?
Certainly. Can I check from the side of Gottlieb and the DEPI team? Any additional comments or thoughts?
Good afternoon. Chairperson, thanks, Daryl. Yes, I think, well, you covered all the points in terms of where we come in, ecological infrastructure. Just to add to that, Chairperson and members, that besides alien clearing, there's also active rehabilitation taking place by our department. Since 2013, we have rehabilitated 32 sites along the Berg and the Breda River, with there being 91 also job creation in terms of actively restoring those sites with indigenous vegetation. And so that also in terms of looking at the value and the benefit of active rehabilitation, which also plays a role in flood management. It slows down the water as if these areas are rehabilitated sooner when alien clearing takes place. So we work very much in collaboration with the agencies such as Agriculture and Cape Nature and others which are clearing these sites. So as I said, here over 20,958 person days, the 91 FTEs equate to, with over close to 700,000 plants, indigenous plants planted, covering 63 species. So that is key. We're also looking at water quality monitoring as our mandate. And so, yes, as Aisha has mentioned, water quality is also a key aspect of water security, and unless we improve the quality of our water, obviously have also economic impact if we don't. And the point sources which Aisha has mentioned, which includes informal settlements, wastewater treatment works. So there's also in terms of programs which DLG can speak to around wastewater treatment works and the improvement there, but obviously with the capacity of our wastewater treatment works to keep in pace also with population growth, and then we have also in terms of the load shedding impacts which we have, which impact on the quality of rivers, and then it's the informal settlements which are normally set up close to our river water sources, and this improve sanitation is key in informal settlements, but we know that space is a premium, and so but there are technologies out there which is also a local usage which can be implemented, and again working with our human settlements, or what's it, infrastructure department around this. Also the scheduling is key in terms of the informal settlement upgrades, ensuring that when improving the informal settlements, that sanitation and waste removal, improving that is should be prioritized. So with that, Chair, yeah, just to give some insight into those aspects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gottlieb. Can I just check Marius and James from DLG side, and you might as well introduce yourselves because you missed the initial introductions. Marius?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Marius Brandt from Department of Local Government, responsible for municipal infrastructure. Yes, like Aisha as well as Gottlieb mentioned, we developed the 15-year water resilience plan for the province, and obviously we are looking at it in a holistic manner, looking at all the role players within the whole water cycle ecosystem, how all of these are as an integrated way managed to ensure water resilience at the end of the day for the province as a whole. Recognizing obviously the importance of the agricultural sector in the economy of the Western Cape, there was obviously good emphasis on how do we ensure that we keep the water restrictions or the allocation to the agricultural sector in place, or ensure the availability and not reduce the allocation to the agricultural sector going forward. And by doing that, obviously looking how we use water more efficiently and optimally within the urban sector. And obviously they're looking at the land users, the industrial business, as well as the residential component. As Gottlieb also mentioned, we've got also a program in partnership with the Danish government, where we are currently looking at all the wastewater treatment plants along the Berg River to see how we can optimize the operations, obviously to ensure that we do not pollute our rivers. And that is obviously a good opportunity for us to ensure that both the urban as well as the agricultural sector is guaranteed quality water in terms of science standards for drinking water quality, but also in terms of the requirements for exporting of our agricultural produce. And obviously also looking at making sure that our estuaries are not polluted, and then obviously the whole cycle therefore linked to the fish industry, that where the fishes are actually using our estuaries, and the importance of wetlands obviously also come into play. It's also looking at alien vegetation clearing to what extent certain areas should be prioritized, where we can ensure that we can have maximum benefit in terms of the amount of water that can be made additionally available to the water parcel. And then obviously we also have, with our partnership with the French Development Bank, we've got what we call a new innovative way of financing infrastructure, of which a couple of these main wastewater treatment works, as well as augmentation of water resources, are part and parcel of these catalytic projects that has been identified and will be funded by the private sector going forward. Thank you. That's all from my side. I don't know, James, our project manager on the infrastructure resilience program, if you want to come in.
Good morning to colleagues. James Javier Usi from the Municipal Infrastructure Directorate of the Department of Local Government. Marius, I think you've mentioned everything basically in terms of the plan. And what remains now is the workshop that we'll be having in terms of giving clarity on the various deliverables and the tools that have been produced, as well as then planning the implementation and the rollout of the resilience plan throughout the province. But other than that, I think most of the matters you mentioned is what the project entailed. And then also, as we get into the implementation and the rollout, we'll be able to then give more detailed information to the various municipalities as well as Western Cape government departments as well.
Thank you very much. Can I then, and I'm really delighted the Department of Water and Sanitation has joined us. If I can ask Chair that Mr. Daryl Daniels just check if he's got anything that he wants to add. He's the Deputy Director for Institutional Establishment. If I can give Mr. Daniels an opportunity. Thank you, Chair.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I hope everyone can hear me.
Indeed.
My name is, thanks, thank you for the invitation. I'm Daryl Daniels. I'm not for institutional establishment. I'm still with catchment management. So, but thank you for the promotion. I'll take it. So yeah, just on a few things that was said in terms of the presentation that was given. I hope everybody knows that we have gazetted that it is compulsory that every abstraction should have a meter on. So the regulations on metering is out. Everyone abstracting water from the resource may be for Schedule 1, just for normal drinking purpose, or maybe for agriculture, which is on a large scale or small scale. You must have a meter installed if you want to use water in line with your permission. Then we've also, from our side, you know that we normally have the annual runs where we've determined whether or not we need to implement the restriction for the next water year. Instead of having the annual meetings, we've now have these meetings on a quarterly basis, just to monitor the system to see whether or not we need to introduce a restriction at an earlier stage or not. So that is ongoing. Most of you guys party to this meeting are involved or are part of that meeting. In terms of augmentation, as you all know, that currently for the Berg River itself, we are in our final stages of signing the agreements for Bravas. Bravas, for those who don't know, is the Berg River full-flow augmentation scheme that will be constructed in the lower Berg or the middle part of the Berg River close to Heremon. It's a weir where we plan to catch the surplus winter runoff and have stored it in full flow and make it available in summer months. So during summer months, I can confirm that from our side that the agricultural sector did sign the agreement for 2 million. So 2 million of the 23 million that will be made available, or that will now augment the scheme, the system. It is set aside for agriculture. And then you also know, I'm not sure if everybody's part of this information or privy to this information, that we are also now in the planning stages to look at the Mitchell's-Pass diversion. The Mitchell's-Pass diversion is in the Wolseley area where we plan to take some water from that's still in the initial stages. So it's all, we're currently doing the feasibility and having discussions on it, the stakeholder meetings. We had our first one during COVID. So yeah, that is ongoing. Talk about COVID, as you all know, when it comes to the increases on the water resources levies, for the last year and a half, we didn't increase anything per se for the agricultural sector. However, as from the 1st of April, the increases on the water resources management charges on the agricultural sector has increased by no more than 13%. So it's not a huge increase. It's plus minus around inflation or so. I'm saying plus minus around inflation. I'm being lenient at the moment. It's just above inflation, as you all know. And from our side, we are currently busy with the those who are on the Berg River stem. You all know that we have 12+1 irrigation boards, depending or making use from water from the Western Cape Water Supply System. And currently, there will be, not currently, we are in the process of it being gazetted that those irrigation boards need to transform into water use associations within the next 6 months. The current proposal that we have on the table is that the irrigation board wants 12+1 irrigation boards to transfer into or transform into 12+1 water use associations. As you all know, those who are familiar with the speeches of our minister, he's very in favor of lesser institutions, localized institutions, people involvement. So on that notion, we deemed it fit, and as a proposal, we're currently busy discussing with the irrigation board to transform those 12+1 water use associations, irrigation boards into one water use association with sub-district. Our dam levels on the Western Cape Water Supply System looks healthy. I mean, the last Saturday's rainfall, we won't pick up this morning on our dam recordings, but it should be available as from tomorrow onwards, even though that we did circulate those who are privy to the email where we send our weekly dam storage levels. We did circulate it this morning, but it's not, it didn't accumulate or account for most of some of the rainfall that we've experienced over the weekend. You will only be able to pick it up by tomorrow or so. Sorry. Mr. Chairperson, currently, I know people want to ask about the CMA process. Yes, there's one CMA area gazetted for the Western Cape. As per the Act, the all areas should be managed in terms of water resources for the one CMA. Currently, we still manage the Western Cape as the BCMA area, and the Boer Olifants is being done by the Department of Water and Sanitation. This is us at the moment. So we have that current operations in place. We're not sure what's going to happen in the next 6 months, but the idea is to have this one fully flexed and functional CMA responsible for the whole Western Cape area. But that will be communicated to you in due course. In essence, Mr. Chairperson, there has been the last point I would like to raise. This is my last point. The agricultural sector has reported, in fact, has raised the concerns about the infrastructure or the current status of the full flow canals. We have been informed for the last a week or 2 weeks ago, we, from our side, the catchment side, with some of the stakeholders, we had a site visit and to inspect the canal itself. We did submit a request to our national office, the NWRI, the National Water Resource Infrastructure Unit, who's responsible for the canals. They have appointed a construction team. They are on site. They have been clearing the siphons over the last week or so, and they're doing some good work. So they've also removed some of the debris that's in the canal that's limiting the flow to the full flow dam itself. In essence, Mr. Chairperson, that's all from the Department of Water and Sanitation at this stage. And thank you for listening to me. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Daniels. We could listen to you for hours, it seems. And thank you very much for what you're also doing for the upcoming rainy season. Please remain on. There might be some questions coming your way. Mr. Jacobs, anybody else that you would like to give an opportunity?
No, I think that's the lot, Chair. As you've heard, I think there's been a comprehensive response to the questions and concerns raised by the committee. And as I've said, I trust we've done it justice and we're open to receive any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jacobs, and thank you for inviting so many of your colleagues from other departments. Water is a scarce resource, but we also share this resource between agriculture and local government, and environmental affairs is hugely involved, as well as our local governments and as you've indicated, also our National Department of Water and Sanitation. So thank you very much. It's really a privilege to be chairing a meeting with so many of the important role players with us. So honourable members, over to you for questions. I expect that there might be a long list of questions. May I ask that you first limit your questions to 2 per round, and I hope there will be an opportunity for multiple rounds of questions. And the first hand that I have noticed, let me just make sure, is that of the Honourable America, then Honourable Marais, and then Honourable Maran. In that order, America, Marais, Maran. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, Mr. Jacobs, for the presentation. I think it was, for me, it was extremely informative because much of the information that you shared with us were not familiar to me, and appreciate you contributing to my learnings. So, Chairperson, I'm going to focus on water losses from dams and conveyance system, but particularly from dams. One of the slides, it was stated that, you know, Beaufort West, Luhamka area, Ottawa and George, and we were provided with the evaporation loss of water from those dams in particular. Now, as a person who don't really understand the figures, talking about 3.5 meters of water losses, I'm not so very sort of conversant in terms of the quantum of the losses, but nonetheless, my question is, those are specific dams that we refer to. Now, we have 5 districts in the Western Cape. Would there be information available for the losses within the 5 districts of all the dams? Anyone could also perhaps, you know, if you categorize those dams listed in the slide into various districts, is it fair, or can we extrapolate the losses onto private dams within the various districts where these dams are located, or is it perhaps not a fair sort of view in terms of extrapolation? Secondly, Chairperson, municipalities contribute to a significant amount of water losses within our water ecosystem, and that is for various reasons, due to poor maintenance of infrastructure, lack of capital investment in infrastructure to secure our water security. Is there a sense in terms of, you know, from the Department of Local Government in particular, where we could better manage water losses within municipalities, and 2, whether we could, or is there from the Department of Water and Sanitation, whether there is whatever, some sort of program to support municipalities who may not have the capital to expand and maintain critical infrastructure that needs that deals with water security. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. And then Honourable Murray, if you could perhaps also indicate to whom you direct the question, Honourable Murray.
No, I can't, sir, because they made such long speeches. I don't know who said what. I will ask a question in general, and anybody's free to answer it, sir, if it suits you.
Please proceed then.
Right. I want to ask tell the presenters that farmers are not philanthropists, they're economists. And you put it very, very bluntly when you said that they want more income per drop. They don't want more crops per drop, but more income per drop. Now, did you see a change in production methods or crops planted by our farmers in the Western Cape? Did they switch from one crop that's less profitable to another one that's more profitable because of water shortages? Do you see a move towards game farming from sheep and cattle farming? What effect does these water shortages have on farming methods? And did you, now that you said that a bigger allocation of water is going to be given to farmers, farmers have water allocation permits for water utilization for specific area. Now, the rest of the farms are considered dry land. Does it mean that with increased water for irrigation, that farmers will be able to contest their water allocation for optimal farm utilization? And the last question is, you know that I don't think there's a problem with water allocation in the Northern Cape. Should the Western Cape not be partnering with the Northern Cape for agricultural solutions? They have ample water and could be positioned as the food basket for the Cape. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Murray, and thank you for being to the point. Honourable Maran, you next.
Thanks, Chairperson. Am I audible?
We do hear you, and while I've got the mic, perhaps if Mr. Jacobs could assist by directing the questions then to certain officials when it comes to answering these questions. Over to you, Honourable Maran.
Thanks, Chairperson. First, Chair, let me also welcome the presentation by the department and the attempts from their side as a department to mitigate the impact of climate change, but also the issue of water scarcity within this particular province. So let me welcome the report, and also let me welcome the attempts from their side. Chair, the last person that have spoken, I think it was Mr. Daniels, that spoke about new legislation, and it's now compulsory for water users to have a meter when they extract water from either, whether it's a dam or a river. Now, in 2018, Chair, remember in April 2018, when Day Zero was still there, water was transferred from the Berg River Dam towards the Misverstand Dam. And that water was transferred via, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Berg River Dam. And on 17 April, they basically released that water. I think it was like in 5 million cubic meters. And only a half of that water basically reached that particular dam. Now, days before, I know Cape Winelands, for instance, had a put up a drone in the air to see what happened basically across that river, and you could clearly see how farmers put their pumps in the river, in anticipation of the water that will come down the river within the next few days. And basically, part of the evaporation, water that have disappeared, a number of water has been stolen by farmers through that particular process without having any meters basically connected to their pumps or whatsoever. So it's only those who wants to extract water legally will have meters, and those who wants to steal will not have meters. It's just in passing by. Chair, one of the presenters spoke about dams, and some of the dams are fully allocated and some even over allocated. Now we know on the 10th of February, for instance, the work that was done in your Rossenville Worcester area towards the Brandfrey Dam, the Holswood project, a number of new water will get into that particular dam. And my concern is water users that sit with licenses that's been over allocated, how will it impact on them? Will there a certain percentage basically that will be allowed for those basically who sit with a permit for so much water but get lesser water? Or what will happen in that particular case when new water will run into a particular dam? The same when it comes to, we have now heard there's a completion date for the Clonwilliam Dam, February 2028. New water that will also flow into that particular dam, and how will it impact basically those who have licenses where water has been over allocated, whether they will have an opportunity basically to claim water that they have not received over say a number of years, and with new water that's coming in, will they be able to claim that particular portion that's outstanding? Yeah, Chair, let me stop there first.
Thank you, Honourable Maran. I want to link onto two of the aspects raised by Honourable Maran. The first one is, in my engagements with farmers, it seems to me that as if there was initially at least a huge resistance to them having to spend money on metering the water that they extract, to the extent that they say, if you want to know how much water I extract, you provide the meter. To what extent have you since then been able to get the cooperation of our farmers, Mr. Daniels, as I fear, as Honourable Marani said, that a lot of water is still being unaccounted for in terms of people reporting monthly on the water that they've extracted. And then the second one is, we've heard that, you know, schemes such as the Holswood Canal will now allow your department to issue additional water use rights or licenses. How are those rights allocated? Because we do want to support transformation in the agricultural sector, but we also want to make sure that those licenses are allocated to people that have got the ability to really convert that additional water into crops and food production, etc. Do people apply for those water rights? Do you put in a bid? Do you buy them? Perhaps if you wouldn't mind just assisting with us in that regard, just understanding the process of when there's additional water available to allocate to users. How do you go about during that process? Those are the questions from the first round, it seems. Mr. Jacobs, would you like to allocate?
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and we certainly welcome the comments that have been made in support of the presentation and the inputs. I think the first question from Member America, if I can direct it to Peter Quake, in terms of water losses from dams and the ability that we have to quantify in all of the districts what those losses are. Then the second question from Member America, the first one was directed to Department of Local Government, and would want to ask that Marius Brandt deal with that question in terms of, can we better manage losses in municipalities? And then the second part of the question for Department of Water and Sanitation, to asking about is there a program to support municipalities? The third question and the first question from Member Marais is around what the impact of climate change has been, if we've seen more shifts brought about by climate change, and if I can ask Dr. Stephanie Midgley if she can deal with that question. A number of further questions from both Member Marais and Member Maran and the chairperson directed to water and sanitation in terms of can farmers contest allocation? Should we partner with Northern Cape regarding optimal water use? We've noted a comment by Member Maran that only those who want to be legal will install meters, and that those who want to crook the system will make sure there is no meterage. But particularly, how will DWS deal with permits for in terms of the dams that have been built? And both Member Maran and the chairperson, your questions really relate to the responsibility of Department of Water and Sanitation. So if I can ask Mr. Quake, followed by Marius Brandt of DLG, then Mr. Daniels, then Dr. Midgley, and then come back to Mr. Daniels. And I'll then check, Chair, if anybody else from DEDP or Aisha's side want to add to any of the comments made. If we can follow that order. Peter, please come in.
Thank you, Chairperson. Regarding the evaporation losses from water surfaces, the figures presented are historic figures for APAN. Now, APAN is the size of 1 meter by 1 meter, and the evaporation loss, in particular, the example for Beaufort West, Leugamka, in the order of 3.5 meters. What that means is that if you have a dam or a water body that is 3.5 meters deep, the evaporation that will take place over a 12-month period is 3.5 meters. Obviously, on a particular year, if it's a wetter or drier year, it might vary to an extent, but that's an indication of the amount of water that will be lost from the surface due to evaporation. And that's applicable to your swimming pool, to a large dam, or a smaller farm dam. So that's also the reason why it doesn't make sense to keep water in dams for too long. If you want to keep water for, say you have droughts in the Karoo of say 4 years, you can't keep enough water for 4 years because it will evaporate. You know that 4 times 3.5 is about 15 meters. All your water will evaporate, so you don't get any benefit. So there's an optimum. To actually determine that in the regions is a bit of a difficult task because the shape of all dams differ. And as I said, it varies also with the particular climatic conditions are at that specific dam site. So I don't know if this fully or adequately answered the question.
Thank you. Yeah, we can come back again, but can I check? Marius, please go on.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs and Chair, Honourable Chair. Yes, in terms of water losses, that is obviously a big component in managing your water resource. And depending on the source of the water loss, we would then normally determine what strategy we would follow to minimize water losses. So where we've got the consumer as the source of potential water losses, we've got water conservation and water demand management awareness campaigns, especially during times of drought. And here we can sort of indicate to the consumers how they can actually ensure that there's no leaks on their oven or as well as from their appliances. And we can also provide them with the assistance in terms of how they can make better use of water conservation devices in terms of the plumbing within the houses to ensure that they reduce water usage in that area. In terms of leakages within the municipal network, we are providing funding from various sources for the installation of water meters at your consumers. In some cases, these are smart meters where you can draw exception reports on a daily basis and where then you can send out your team to go and actually look at where we are losing water at various consumers. We can also there identify whether it is an illegal use of water, bypass of a leak water meter, or that there is maybe potentially water losses in the water network. Further, we can provide funding for the installation of bulk meters, zonal meters. All of this assists with the calculation of your water balances in these various zones that can narrow down the area that you can go and investigate and detect potential leaks to be fixed. Then we can also look at pipe burst records and that link to the age of the network as well as the material that is used. You can identify where you've got to replace these old pipelines, especially our old asbestos pipelines in our old towns. We've got pipe replacement programs where we also then prioritize funding from various water funding streams. We are working very close with Department of Water and Sanitation, where we've got a coordination of the various grants to make sure that we optimally maximize the impact of the various funding streams. So we look at how we prioritize our MIC funding in municipalities towards installation of water meters, in terms of replacing of aging water infrastructure, as well as looking at our own Department of Local Government water resilience grant, as well as how we integrate that with funding streams coming from Department of Water and Sanitation, such as your WSIC program. I think from my side, I think that's all from at this point in time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Marius. Daryl, can I ask that you just hold back so I can, because there's a number of questions you need to answer. If I can bring in Dr. Stephanie Mitchley first and then hand over to you, Daryl. So Stephanie, can you, just in terms of, are we seeing shifts in crop production as a result of climate change?
Yes, thank you. The answer is yes and no. So if we look at what happened, especially during the drought, as an indicator of where those shifts might be taking place, it depends on whether we are looking at irrigated annual crops or irrigated perennial crops. So perennial crops with a lifetime of at least 20, most of them 30 years, orchards and vineyards. One would not easily see changes in the crop types that are being planted, because there's only a very small percentage of orchards that are planted every year. So what you would have seen in those years was that farmers would take the existing water allocation and do what's called a water balance or water accounting. And then if they only had a small fraction of the water they normally would, they would decide where to prioritize, which orchards or vineyards would be getting that water. And it was yeah, so production practices definitely were adjusted, and it was done to reduce economic losses, to make sure that farmers would not have to retrench their workers, and to make sure that they remained in business and remained at least somewhat profitable in those years to be able to pay salaries. So yes, the economic water productivity, we call it. So in other words, maximizing the income per drop was a very important consideration when doing those water balances or water accounting. Obviously, with annual crops, the decisions can be made on an annual basis as to whether it's worthwhile planting or sowing something if there's not enough water. So those decisions were also made. But we are seeing a shift to crops that, yes, they are hardy to climate change. For example, more citrus is being planted, more lemons, which are very, very profitable at the moment. But they are also climate smart, but they also do use water. So if they are replacing a field that has not previously been irrigated, then there would be additional demands on water allocations. So yes, I think the answer is we are starting to see those shifts. But for farmers, the main thing is to remain profitable and to grow their farms. I hope that answers the questions.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. And then Daryl, number of questions directed to you. Please, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Chairperson, may I quickly display something, if you don't mind, through you and the committee, if I can quickly display something on. Mr. Chairperson. Okay.
Please do. I think you may have the right to beam your screen onto ours.
Thank you for the permission.
Yeah.
What I'm
already
saying.
See your blank screen. There
and the one
now.
There it is. Oh. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. So what I'm saying to you right now is just based on the question. So what we do have in the department and what we, especially our larger dams, we monitor those dams on a regular basis. And every month, like I said earlier, Monday, we have the capacity of those dams that we monitor on a regular basis. Now, if you look on the, forgive me if I make an example of the Western Cape Water Supply System, but just one system in particular is the Western Cape Water Supply System that consists out of a few dams. It includes Teerwaterskloof Dam, Bergrivier Dam, Wemershoek Dam, Voorvlei Dam, as well as the Misverstand Weir. We use some of the rivers, which is the rivers on the end, as well as the Bergrivier itself as conduits to transfer the water to various areas where there's demand. Now, during dry period, we all know that your dams evaporation is much higher, so your water losses on the dams are fairly higher. So what we do from our side is to draw down the dams equally to ensure that you decrease the evaporation as well as the water losses on the dam. So if for example, your dam lower down is on 50% and your dams upstreams are maybe at 60% or 90%, 80%. What we do is that we offset our demand from the lower dams and then take our demands. When I say demands, our demands, it means for all the sectors from your upstream dams, just to make sure that you also bring it down safely to maybe 50 or 60%, depending on the status of our dams at the moment of time. With that being said, Mr. Chair, so just to respond to the other question that was posed by Honourable America, when it comes to water losses, is the one I've showed you now is from the system itself. Then you have reticulation losses that is being a big challenge from certain municipalities. What we do have a unit that supports and also look at on a regular basis what is the status on water losses on the systems being managed by municipalities. When I say systems, I'm referring to reticulation systems. We also take into account unaccounted for water. Unaccounted for water means that, you know what, the municipality can't account, there's no revenue collected for that water. It could be as a result of losses beyond certain meters that they can't pick up. So unaccounted for water is also something that we are serious about from a department side. We are looking at, I'm not sure how far it is, because unfortunately I'm not involved with that unit. On a reward system, it's the no drop. Because we have a specific unit that focuses on water conservation and water demand management for both one, the agricultural sector, and one for the domestic sector. Now, the domestic sector also caters for industry as well as for mining. So these are the units that we have within the department. Currently, besides the funding that my colleague spoke about earlier on, Marius, about the funds that we have and the programs we have for funding, WSEC and so. I think most of us, especially those who are involved with municipalities, are familiar with that, where the department, if the money is available, Treasury through the department makes funding available for certain programs for municipalities. Now, the question that Honourable Marie raised was very, I think, it is something that is we probably have to have a bigger discussion on this. But just in summary, the biggest allocation for on a national scale, one can say is agriculture, but for the Western Cape, it's slightly shift, especially on the Berg area side. Now, agriculture and domestic is basically head on head when it comes to percentages of demand from our systems. And in terms of the ample water in the Western Cape, you see, ample water should be defined in not just of what's available, but one should take into account the demand on what's available. Now, the demand slightly has changed since 1998. So previously, our demands were for domestic industry, mining, and agriculture. But subsequent to 1998, the demand for the environment is such a big thing as well, because the first thing we need to cater for is that the demand for domestic as well as for the environment before we look at other priorities when it comes to the demand. So in terms of whether it's climate change or climate variation, it is quite difficult to predict what the future will have in store for us, especially when it comes to the unpredictability of our weather patterns in the Western Cape, because today you can experience 4 seasons in one day. This morning rainfall, and this afternoon it will be sunny. And long-term prediction shows that climate will change, but if you look at the short to medium terms, with that uncertainty, we focus on what we have versus the demand to make sure that the availability of water can cater for at least 2 seasons. In terms of what Honourable Malan said during what happened during the last drought, 100% spot on to the fact that we made the releases from Misverstand, but half of that not from Berg River Dam, but only half of that water reached the Misverstand weir. Now, there could be many attributes that contributed to the losses, one being that unlawful water use, as you correctly said, those who were lawfully allowed to use water that took their restricted amount, which was still lawful, but they were upstream, though they got the benefit from that as well. And last but not least, it could be, because the surface has changed and the sponge effect of the river requires or takes first amount of water as well. It could be that as well. But in all essence, as a result of what happened, we do not want to pinpoint to one thing without facts. Therefore, we are on a regular basis, and I'm saying regular, and I'm using the word regular very loosely, once every 6 or 7 months or so, where we do blitzes or so on particular areas to look at what's happening on farms, especially those that appear into rivers, our main rivers as well, upstream, to make sure that when we do go into a drought, and that's what we can do in the next drought as well. I'm saying the next drought because we will get a season where we will have lesser rainfall than what is normal in the future. It may be next year or the year after next year, even 10 years from now. But we need to put plans in place to make sure that we have a proper response. The last drought caught us off guard. We did have response in place. We made sure that there's no day without water in the Western Cape. But we felt that we could learn lessons from what we've been through. And from those lessons learned, we can now say that besides the water meters, we need to put in a water resource management plan in place to make sure that instead of those upstream taking the lawful allocation first, allow those downstream to first take the water, especially when the middle stretch of the Berg River reaches a certain flow, and then we can take those upstream can take the lawful restricted allocations. So we also, like I said earlier on, that looking at the department or the CMA, even if you fully populate both the department and the CMA, will not be in a capacity to go to each and every farm to make sure that they are compliant. The water management institutions that we now establishing, in fact, transforming the irrigation boards to the water use associations, one of the key roles will be to do checkups whether or not people are using the lawful allocation from the affected resources. Also bear in mind, we've also picked up and responded and we've removed some of the unlawful sandbags that were placed in the Berg River. And now that we're busy with the verification of water use, we've also looked at, one, the amount of storage on certain on all properties, how much water is being stored on all properties. 2, are there any structures like weirs or other impeding structures or a structure that a farmer has constructed on his property to protect his pump, and that structure now is causing what do you call it, impedance of flow, and ultimately limiting the flow or the water allocation of downstream water users. We're looking at that as well now with our verification of water use. Now, the other point that the Honourable Malan has raised was the issue about I think the brandvlei. I'm not involved with brandvlei, but if I can change the question or maybe relate the Bergrivier Voorvloei Augmentation Scheme to brandvlei and Klein Willem, it goes like this. So what we first need to look at is that when you look or plan for an off-budget or a new augmentation scheme, you first need to ascertain whether or not it will be paid by the Treasury. If not paid by Treasury, will it be paid by the user? Now, if it's being paid by the user, it's being considered as an off-budget project in terms of the pricing strategy. Now, off-budget project work as such that the user will pay, or a subsidy that the user will receive will pay for the project. Now, when you take that project into consideration, you take various aspects into consideration. One being the environmental conditions, the reserve, that's for basic human needs as well as for the environment. You take into consideration the lawful allocation. So if you have a permit or authorization to take water from the system, then that permit needs to be taken into consideration. But if at that stage, before the project comes to effect, the system is already in over allocation, you can't just assume, or in fact, we can't just assume from the department side that the project now will balance the system. It should first mean that what was the reason, why was the over allocation? Was it over allocation as a result of claim existing lawful water use? Now, claim existing lawful use, first of all, existing lawful water use is one of the permissions, the permits in terms of the legislation. It's a permit that says that if you had permission in 1998 to use water and you use that water during that period, you can claim for existing lawful water use. That should have been confirmed through verification of water use. Now, many people claim that in terms of that instrument, much more water than they've initially used. Now, through our assignment of the process of verification, we now reduce that water to the lawful allocation that was permitted by the said property. If you receive the license subsequently, and that license, as a result of the license, you are still not getting the water as a result of the over allocation, then there's something that needs to be looked at on that particular license and that system in question or that relates to that license. But we also need to focus that the whole system, the whole idea of off-budget project is to bring more water into the system for 2 or 3 various reasons. If it's for balancing, the chances that people will pay for it, especially the stakeholders, are very slim. Therefore, most of the allocations will be made available. Now, during the planning stages, what we do is that there's consultation and you get buy-in from the various sectors. Sometimes the sectors are represented by, for example, the irrigation board. When it's municipalities, they are presented by the various relevant municipalities, or if it's industry, by industry, mining, by mining. They'll say during the initial planning stages that they might need X amount of water. That X amount of water are now being subject to basically, looking at certain aspects on the resource alone. For brandvlei, I can't say. But bearing in mind is that even though if you sign an agreement that you will partake into the project, it will still be subject to an authorization. Now, in this case, it's all this be licensing. When you look at licensing, you need to look at the resource itself, the augmentation scheme, as well as the National Water Act, the requirements of Section 27 of the National Water Act. And those requirements take into consideration various aspects. Now, if you look at the water sector as is, especially for the agricultural, industrial, as well as the mining part, you will see that the sector is not transformed to the extent that you actually would want it to be. And Section 27(1) of the National Water Act in particular makes provision for redress. So we look at the set criteria before we say yes or no to any application for authorization. Now, I think Honourable Malan also asked if you have certain concern about a license that was issued. What is the process? Now, in terms of Section 148 of the National Water Act, the Act makes provision that if the department made a decision, any person who's interested in affected party can appeal against the decision. May it be declined for an application, or may it be an issuance of an application. Now, the process to be followed is you appeal to the tribunal. We look at the merits of the application, and yes or no, we will consider that. But also bear in mind, if a system is under stress as a result of an over allocation, as a result of claim ELU in particular, the relevant institution responsible for water resources management, like I said, for the beheerhouers is the BCMA. For the bergolifants is the department at the moment, because the Act makes provision in the absence of the CMA, the Department for Water Resources Management functions. The department can make then the decision to impose on the license that we've issued a restricted volume. So there could be a permanent restriction on both either the agricultural and domestic sector, just to make sure you do not violate the resource to the extent it's unrecoverable. So there are systems in place to give effect to the concern that was raised on an instrument like a license or ELU that was issued incorrectly, and as a result of that, the whole system or the resource or the river, as we may call it, is under stress. So, Mr. Chairperson, the issue about allocation, I've addressed that. The issue about transformation, I spoke about it slightly, and our key focus is transformation of institution and the water sector, and we want full representation on all water allocated. Now, bear in mind, water allocated is not only on the taking part, it also gives effect to other things associated to water resources. If you want to develop something within a wetland or near a wetland, those kind of things all trigger water users. And Mr. Chairperson, at the next meeting, if you allow, maybe we can do a presentation as to what the access, what the water use is, and what the water use instrument authorization is, those four of them in terms of the Act, and have a full discussion on the licensing process if the need be. So, Mr. Chair, I said a lot. I hopefully responded to everything that was assigned to the Department of Water and Sanitation. Thank you for listening to me, sir. And all.
Is there anything if he wants to add? DEDP are the only ones who've not responded to any of the questions. Gottlieb, anything you want to add to what's been said?
Through you, Chair. Daryl, no, there was nothing, directed where we could answer on. I think it's been all covered by agriculture and other colleagues in other departments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gottlieb. Back to you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Honourable members, again, if we could ask for a quick round of not more than 2 questions per member, and I already recognise Honourable Maran's hand.
Chair, thanks. I got 3 questions. Can I finish all 3? That's my last.
Please proceed.
Yeah, thanks. Chair, just on the William Dam, and as I've said earlier on, we have now received more or less a date when that particular project will be completed, 2028. Just wanted to check, Chair, the canal that's transporting water to your Machikama and other areas, whether that canal will be able to transport more water with the expansion of the dam that's underway. That's one. Secondly, Chair, you remember when we visited Machikama, I think it was September last year, the municipality, we have basically received complaints, and I'm not sure whether Daryl have spoken about mines, about Tonox mines in that particular area who bought up some of their farms, but not using that farms for agricultural purposes, but basically to get hold to their water allocations and then basically transport that. And there's a pipeline that goes with that road. I'm not sure whether it's Brandsebein, transport that particular water towards the mine and using agricultural water for mining purposes. I'm just wanted to check what is your view in terms of that, Darren. And then, Chair, to Isa, the invasive plant. clearing, and she has spoken about almost 9,000 hectares. And she have also spoken about 6,000 hectares. Just wanted to check, is it land that can be used for agricultural purposes, and whether some of that land is under irrigation, and if how much of that is been under irrigation. Thanks.
Honourable Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to know, is groundwater considered, and this question is to Mr. Darrell, do your department consider groundwater as a critical resource to maintain water levels, and especially taking into account the effect of climate change? And the things, I don't want to mention it, you know what they are, that affects the quality of groundwater negatively. And informal settlements is but one of them. How are they being addressed, if at all? Water at municipal level that's unaccountable for. Nobody pays for it because it's not registered on the meters of households. Underwater leakages. Is there any agreement between the province and municipalities to address this problem of water leakages to houses? Here where I live in Durbanville, almost every week there is infrastructure, the underwater, the ground pipes burst and the water flow out for hours, sometimes half a day. The whole streets, everything is full of water. It happens regularly. Do you ever consult with the Metro on this issue? I've complained and complained and complained. And all they can say is a water pipe burst, and the water flows away for hours on hours, sometimes a whole day. What are you doing about it? Is there any plan? Is there any strategy to address this wastage? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to turn to the issue of alien clearing and some of the work being done in our rivers and riparian areas. I've now seen some of the construction work, but a concern was shared with me that under the land care project, sometimes all the trees on the banks of the river are being removed. And it's believed that, and I think the Honourable Murray would appreciate this, that, you know, not all species of blue gum trees are necessarily invasive in nature. And they provide valuable pollen for bee farmers, but also that their roots play a huge role in stabilizing river banks, etc. So perhaps if you would just mind, I do know that gum trees are, blue gums are known for their high water consumption. But perhaps if you could just assist on how do we go about when we clean these river systems from aliens, etc. And then secondly, on private land, some farmers, it's my impression, you know, would like these river banks to be cleared. And as you've indicated, some of them even contribute financially or in other ways to such projects. But then there are other farmers that actually put to good use, or their good use, some of these aliens. For example, in the Cederberg, there's a farm with a huge camping site. And unfortunately, the much needed shade in that camping site is provided by mostly wattle trees, which are also see as one of the invasive species, and one that unfortunately is now spreading its seeds, all the way down to the Clanwilliam Dam and probably even further. So firstly, on the whole issue of the clearing of rivers, how do you go about, as I've said, some farmers want their land to be cleared, some probably don't. And what rights or what force do you have to then go onto farms to clear such rivers there where you are? And then, if I may also ask, in terms of infrastructure such as the canal that you referred to running from I think I thought it was from the Bolshoek where, do we have emergency plans in terms of procurement of services, etc.? Should money be or work be needed quite urgently? And we often in buildings have got fire drills, etc., to simulate cases where a fire might break out. Do we have such exercises where we, for example, would be able to source such tractors with big pumps, or source earth-moving equipment at short notice, etc.? Are there existing contracts, and how do we go about? Because I can quite easily imagine that the amounts needed, I think you've said 10 million was involved in the 2015 breakage, that 10 million rand is probably exceeding the ability of a water user association's cash reserves. So perhaps if you could just help me to how can we mitigate such cases, and secondly, if there is an emergency, how can we respond as quickly as possible? Thank you very much. Over to you, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm assuming the questions to Mr. Daryl is Daryl Daniels and not Daryl Jacobs. So if I can ask Daryl to deal with the questions around Clanwilliam Dam and the issue of mines, if he's aware of whether mines have bought up farms to secure water and redirect that water. And there's also the question about the significance of groundwater for water resource management. And then Aisha, you can deal with the questions around alien clearing, invasive plants, private land and infrastructure, and Peter can also fill in there. And then Marius, if you can deal with if there's any agreement again between your department and municipalities around the extensive water losses that Member Maria has spoken about. Thank you. In that order, Daryl, please come in.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs, and thank you, Mr. Chairperson. If I may ask this committee that when it comes to the Clanwilliam project, I've got very little knowledge about it. I'm familiar with the canal. I know from my side that the canal does have some limitations. We are looking at it. We were hoping that we can put some work on the canal as part of the current project when we do the dam raising of Clanwilliam Dam. There are a planning committee looking at that. If you allow me, Mr. Chairperson, is that I can go back to the committee, get a response from them, and then the response then accordingly. I also know that when it comes to breakages, unfortunately, the pricing strategy does not allow the department, the Treasury, the PFMA does not allow the department to have an emergency contract in place. So what we normally do is that when we do have breakages and our construction site the team is available, we get them on board to assist. But many times, many occasions, the Water Association is playing a vital role to respond to these smaller emergencies. But I can take anything relating to the Clanwilliam and the canals, the infrastructure associated to the canal or the dam itself or the whole scheme to the relevant officials and then get back to you on that one. Honourable Marie spoke about one of our favourite topics that we normally talk about, and spot on the issue about groundwater and how certain individuals or some of us are very reluctant or oblivious to the fact how important groundwater really is. The groundwater is one of the resources in terms of the National Water Act, and it's one of our key priorities that needs to be protected and managed and conserved in a sustainable manner. So if you look at groundwater, you know, the whole issue with certain limitations in the legislation allow many people to drill and use groundwater for certain activities without even going through the process of a general authorization or a license, in particularly when they are within the curtailed limit. So that's the one issue. The other issue that Honorable Marie spoke about was the issue about water quality. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to groundwater quality, there are various influences. One being septic tanks. We no longer, from the department side, allow septic tanks because there's a potential risk of pollution. All septic tanks need to be replaced and substituted by conservancy tanks. We only support closed systems for any new development. Any development where there is infrastructure associated to sewage or hazardous material close to a water resource, a water course, or where the groundwater table is fairly high, that we do not support through any application. It must be through a license, and through that license, there must be a study done where the applicant and its professional service providers, consultants, look at potential impacts on the groundwater resource. And if the mitigations to those potential impacts is not suffice for us, we will, as a department, will not approve such an application. Even when it comes to new development, like I now earlier spoke about housing development or any other development close to a water resource, a water course, or an area where the groundwater table is fairly high, we are very reluctant. Over and above that, unfortunately, within the metro, there are certain parts where the groundwater table is fairly high. And if you construct a house and there's a basement, even when it comes to mining as well, and you need to dewater that, and that dewatering might potentially influence on two things. One, the quality of the water, as well as reducing flow to the aquifer, then we ask for an impact assessment. And if that impact assessment indicates or highlight activities that can't be mitigated, then the department normally doesn't say yes or approve such an application. So through our application process, we do give effect. Over and above that, we most recently done the resource quality objectives. Now, the resource quality objectives look at the current state, both quantity and quality of resources, certain resources. That's part of the Gazette. Now, in certain areas and certain aquifers, we did highlight in the Gazetted resource quality objectives. So the current state is what we have now, and then we looked at the desired state. So whatever we prove may be just a normal response to an inquiry, it must be in line with the resource quality objectives. And if any activity does not maintain the current status quo of a resource, or it will have a desire or long-term impact on the resource, the department are within its right to say no on such an application. In terms of what Honorable Marie also said is that, you know, when it comes to pipe bursts and stuff, the response times of municipality, yes, we do have bilaterals with municipalities. I can't remember. I think the last one we had with City of Cape Town was like 2-3 months ago. And what we do look at, we look at pollution from wastewater treatment works, impacts from formal, informal industrial areas on resources, and we also focus on pipe bursts, may be your sewer pipes where there's overflows, or may be your general pipes that transfer your potable water to end users. They normally report back on us and come up with the action plan. In terms of the response time, I can't say why it takes a little bit long in certain areas on behalf of the City of Cape Town or any municipality, but surely that is something that we probably have to look at or into as well. Now, Mr. Chair, through you, the last point that's also being highlighted is the issue about when a mine purchases a farm and then they use that water for mining purpose, what is the legal route? What are the legal routes to follow? In terms of the National Water Act, Section 25, when you change the sector is agriculture and the mining is a different sector. So if you change the water use sector from agriculture to mining, it can only be facilitated through a license application. And that license application is normally being approved by the, in fact, not normally, in this case, it is being approved by the Department of Water and Sanitation. And unfortunately for this committee, I cannot confirm nor deny, because I do not know. I need to double check whether or not Toronax Mine received an application for the sector change. I can confirm to this committee that in the last 2 years, Toronax Mine did receive 2 licenses from the department. The licenses for what it was issued for, I cannot say at the moment, because I need to go into the system to verify that, or if it was a change of sector. So the question is legally, if somebody purchases a farm and they want to use that agricultural water for a different purpose, maybe mining or well, or even a different property, it can only be allowed through a license process. No other process can facilitate it unless they don't request to the relevant institutions, such as a water management institution, irrigation board, or water association, to transfer that water use on a temporary basis from one sector to another. And I don't think in this case it happened, because I can't tell you in where those mines are situated. It doesn't look, in some of those parts, there's not a water user association for some of those farms. So, Mr. Chairperson, those are all the questions that was addressed to the Department of Water and Sanitation was now responded to for the second round. That's all for now, Mr. Chairperson. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Daryl. Yeah, if I can I just check, Chairperson, if Marius, you just want to add anything to what Daryl has shared in relation to agreements between the department and municipality around water losses? And then I'll hand over to Aisha.
Good, thank you. Through Chair, Honourable Murray, as part of our water resilience program, we will be in touch with each and every municipality and assist them with the rollout of water and conservation demand management, of which obviously reduction in water losses is one of the main objectives, and also the biggest value for money. And then we will also, like my colleague from Water Affairs indicated, would look into the response time. It's normally what we refer to in the consumer compact that is signed between municipalities and the consumers, where they normally indicate what is the response time on each and every kind of problem that is a complaint that's logged on this system. That's all from my side, Chair.
Thank you very much. Aisha?
Thank you. The first question with regards to the land that is being cleared of invasive alien plants. So those land is mostly along riparian zones, and that area wouldn't be available for any other activity according to the National Water Act. And that land wouldn't be under irrigation, because it would be the buffer zone between that is required between a watercourse and any other development activity. So you wouldn't be able to replace or reallocate that land to any other user or for any other use. The second one was with regard to the removal of invasive, or the removal of blue gum trees. In the riparian zone, the expansive root system is one of the causes that causes the river to be unstable when a flood goes through. And that is that big tree that I showed in one of the pictures that was moved by a excavator. It's part of destabilizing the riverbank. So that deep root system, what happens when a flood comes in with high velocity of water flow, it eats out the soil around the tree, and in that way causes more erosion and steepens the slope of the erosion as well. What do we do when we remove the invasive alien plants? Is we plant indigenous vegetation. Gottlieb also referred to their rehabilitation project. So in all of the projects, the river protection project as well as the alien clearing project, when we're done with the clearing of invasive alien plants, we plant genetic material of the surrounding area that had been harvested and been cultivated in a nursery. We replant that in that area to ensure that we restore or try and restore the riverbank. The example that I used was the Davenoaks to show how we've cleared, how we've put in groins, and how at the end we had the natural vegetation grow. That also plays a role in slowing down the river flow. And I think that is all the quick. Oh, and then there was a question with regards to the campsite where invasive alien clearing, invasive alien plants occur. In that area, we really encourage the landowner, because in that case, according to our Conservation of Agricultural Resource Act, landowners are responsible for removing invasive alien plants on their property and replanting it with more indigenous trees that is more sustainable to the environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I think we've answered all the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. If I may ask Mr. Peterson just to speak to the issue also of the canal and emergency repair work and who's taking the lead. I think what we've heard from Mr. Daniels is that unfortunately National Treasury don't allow them to already enter into agreements for possible emergencies. To what extent can you mitigate this risk by working with the Users Association or having existing contracts in place? What is the procedure that follows when there is a crisis?
Chair, with regards to the risk management plan or a disaster management plan, I'm sure I'm not the Citrus Cedarburg municipality would have, and Cedarburg and Matsikama municipalities would have disaster management plans in place, and there is a disaster management office at the West Coast District Office. So they would have a plan in place for a canal break, but more specifically on an operational level, what we're doing, we as a department with the Water User Association, we identify weak spots within the system. So the Water User Association identifies a weak spot, they allocate the budget to the weak spot, and as a water user, as a department, we collaborate and add to that budget. So that's the budget that I've said we invest in the budget. So we invest about 6 million, but we have invest 6 million over the last 10 years, and that we've managed to avert in the last 10 years, no breakages in the canal by just following the preventative maintenance program.
Thank you. I recognize the hand of Mr. Kirk.
Thank you, Chairperson. If I may just add here, the Lower Olifants River Water Users Association have an operation and maintenance contract with the Department of Water and Sanitation to operate and maintain the canal system from Bulsukweer downstream. And within that agreement, they are allowed to build up a contingency fund and claim money from their members and keep that in reserve for emergencies. So if there's a radical emergency, they can at very short notice, and that fund is in the millions, at very short notice, get a board decision and roll out contingency plans to immediately address what is needed to rectify the situation. So they don't necessarily have to go through lengthy procurement processes, which are typically applicable to government institutions. And by that means they, I must say that tractors with the big pumps at the back, those are all diamond pumps, which the diamond divers use along the coastline there. So LORVA can very quickly and fast track the procurement of those services and the excavators and contractors to rectify any emergency which they have. So I think in Matsikama, in that particular place, LORVA's capacity and their well-functioning administration is key to effective water service delivery and water surety in that area under otherwise very difficult circumstances. Thank you.
I thank you. You addressed a number of the questions that I didn't even express but had in mind. Thank you very much. Thank you, honourable members. Mr. Jacobs, can we go back to the members?
Certainly, Chairperson. I apologize that we're taking almost the full meeting time, but I think it's very critical that we have this discussion.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you very much. I recognize first the hand of Mr. Murray, Honourable Murray.
Thank you so much, Chairman. You're most gracious today. I would like to know the desalination plants, and I was the only member of this committee to attend the Premier's 2-day conference on water, which was held here in Cape Town. And the thing that struck me was none of the desalination plants, I think there's 4 in the Western Cape, is in operation. And I know the big thing is always there's no money. They don't have money. And on top of that, there's also the electricity, the outages. Will these desalination plants ever become operational? Or do you think we must take it out of the equation as a possible solution to our problems? The Cape is surrounded by seawater, but we can't even use it because none of our desalination plants are working. And people here like Ebenezer and all those areas, Zoar, who need assistance, don't benefit even from Mossel Bay's desalination plant. So I just want to know, is this something which we must now take off our program for possible solutions, or is there not a chance it will become operational again, and when?
Thank you, Honourable Murray, and I trust that Mr. Kirk will lower his hand, that it's a legacy hand from the previous round. Just 2 questions, my last 2 questions. Again, Mr. Daryl Daniels, it's such a privilege to have you here. I was privileged to hike, or what we do call kloofing, down one of the tributaries to the 24 riviere, the 24 rivers, and we ended at the Farm de Hoek, and I was quite impressed by the infrastructure of the Department of Water Affairs, eventually leading to the Voelvlei Dam. Now, my impression is that you recently paid that a site visit, and that you then saw that indeed it needed some cleaning, etc., and that you submitted a special requisition or request for that work to be done in order to maximize the flow of the upcoming winter season. Perhaps if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit more about how severe the problem is and what are the chances of being able to clear those canals before the upcoming winter season. And then lastly, it seems to me as if there's a lot of education required regarding water usage, and I think we saw a lot of that during the Day Zero campaign, which was to a large extent an education and information campaign about water-wise practices, including probably water-wise gardening and so on. And the Honourable Marais spoke about the fixing of leaks and so on. So to what extent can we promote water-wise farming or climate-smart farming? I do note that more and more farmers are putting nets up, and I've been told that that is mostly to try and curb evaporation, and therefore they are now allowed to or able to put bigger hectares, more hectares under crops. Perhaps if you could just expand on perhaps those modern farming methods, as I did not see any reference to that in the presentation. And I don't see any further hands. I presume that would then have been the last round. Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you very much, Chair. If I can ask Marius, that's probably why I'm not in local government to answer these kind of questions on desalination plants. Marius, do you know what the future of the desal plants are?
Yes, Daryl. Desal plants, I'm 100% in agreement with the member that none of these are currently in operation. They've got what they are throttled, so you've got to keep them sort of running, but not for use of desalinizing the seawater. That is mainly for making sure that their membranes are kept restored, because if you don't use them and you start it up in cases of a drought, these membranes will not function and must be replaced at a huge cost. As indicated as well, with desalinization is obviously coming huge cost of energy, making desal water still too expensive for our consumers, and therefore that will always be the last resort that will be tapped into. So in terms of the 15-year resilience plan that was tabled at the Water Indaba we held, we will indicate by what time it will be required for us to go the desal route. And yes, it's true, we are along the coast and there is sufficient water available, but like indicated, that will always be the last resort. It is still, based on current technology, just too expensive for our consumers. Thank you.
Thank you. Then Daryl, if you can come in, how severe is the problems in relation to Voelvlei Dam and the feeder canals?
Mr. Daryl, Mr. Chair, and to all the committee members. To be honest with you, when I was on site, the severity of it wasn't so high. And I'm saying this because I worked on the canal previously in the maintenance team part in 2006 and 2007. So the upkeep, there's been some challenges with some debris and stuff. But in essence, most of the stuff, in fact, 80% of the stuff didn't influence the flow to the dam to the extent that it should be a concern or we should raise alarm on it. I think we're being proactive from the Western Cape to make sure that you don't want to get to a state where it's beyond repair or it's too expensive to repair. Rather be proactive when you picked up something, try to respond immediately. It's more cost effective and it's much better for the infrastructure and for the security of water when you want to get a bit, when you look at the security of water. So those debris from the siphon, if it was still there, could have maybe potentially led to certain flooding, and we've lost some water, but not a lot. But that being removed, it's a plus of us. So it means that as I speak today, those debris on the siphon has already been removed. Some of the debris in the canal itself has been removed. So the whole canal, and as it stands right now, it's much better than it was previously, but previously it wasn't to the extent that we from our side raise concern to say we are in dire straits. So that's the issue on the canal and the infrastructure. Mr. Chairperson, the comments you've made about education and information sharing from the department side, we 100% in agreement with you that the only way to change people's behavior is to create as much as possible awareness, because you don't want to be in a situation where the infrastructure, you have water, but there's no suitable infrastructure. And I'm not talking about the canal, just in general, or you've overused what you have, but now certain points or certain operations of the infrastructure limits you to access the full potential of what's available. So in all areas, if you look, I'm just going through my notes I've made. So it looks, Mr. Chairperson and Mr. Darrell Jacobs, that I've responded from our side to all the points that was raised in the last round. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Daryl. And then on the issue of infrastructure, Chair, and education, I want to point out, I mean, and the point is certainly well made, that education is the key. But what we have seen, and I don't have the committee, the extent that the committee is aware of our flyover project, where we fly over the entire province in terms of determining agriculture, crop shifts, etc., etc. We are currently busy with our third iteration, but what our second iteration of the flyover showed us, which was completed in about 2018, 2019, is that in terms of undercover farming, there was a 390% increase in crops undercover compared to the first iteration. And I think that is incredibly significant, because we know it costs an enormous amount of money to go undercover, but it's a sense of awareness of our farmers and the agricultural sector of the impact of climate change, the impact of shifting climate patterns, and the importance of water resource management. So if I can say, Chairperson, from my side, I think if, along with conservation agriculture, along with the way we supporting our industry in terms of the use of Fruit Look and the like, which we've shared here, there's no doubt that the second iteration of the flyover confirmed the extent of the commitment of the agricultural sector to invest heavily in infrastructure, to the extent that, as I've said, 390% growth in undercover farming really confirms that. Thank you very much, Chairperson and members.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs. Honourable members, I believe I speak on behalf of all of you if I say thank you very much to everybody that came to attend this meeting, that assisted. If I do a quick count, the list of names is a bit too long to thank everyone individually, but it seems to me we may have some 12 people on here that dialed in, that supported, that took part in the question and answer session, for the very informative presentation that the Department of Agriculture has prepared. Thank you very much for all of that, colleagues and officials. I can just say, I think we again recognize the importance of water for firstly agriculture, because that is the primary host today, but then also for our local governments, for everybody, industry, mining has been mentioned. It is such an important and limited resource that I really appreciate the fact that you've all taken an interest in this, and we are really following your work to educate, to establish better climate smart practices, and also to maintain and even improve on the existing infrastructure. It was a particular point of appreciation from my side, Mr. Darrell Daniels from the National Department of Water and Sanitation. It's not always that we get the national departments to come and engage with us so frankly and openly. We really, really appreciate what you are doing, and thank you very much. I believe I can assure you of the support from the Western Cape Department of Agriculture, but also from the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, that we appreciate your efforts, and we want to take hands with you, and we will work with you in making most of this limited resource that we have. Thank you very much to you all. If I could just ask the members to stay on. We've got a number of minutes to approve, quarterly report to consider, tracking document, which unfortunately I think our guests were not privy to. So Mr. Jacobs and others, you're welcome to exit this meeting now, and I will then just give the members some 2 minutes just for a quick leg stretch. Mr. Jacobs, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair and members. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you all. Stay safe. Bye.
Thank you, honourable members. On my computer and watch, it says 15:51. I said 2 minutes. Perhaps I've been a little bit too restrictive. Can we meet at in about 5 minutes, if that's fine with you? I take it as concurrence.
Speaker, if I have to leave, will I upset you because there might not be a quorum? Otherwise, I would ask if I may leave. If not, I'll stay and I'll have to make other arrangements. Something else I had to do.
Honourable Murray, it seems to me we are currently 5 members, which is an excellent attendance. And if you need to go, please, I want to say thank you very much also for your participation, and I do hope that the other members will stay with us.
Thank you, sir. I'm at your mercy. I am not insisting on it. I need to go and fetch grandchildren at university, and but they'll have to wait till if the meeting is finished. But I just asked if I can't, then I will stay till the meeting is over.
I think we would still be quorate without you, Honourable Murray.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, members, and bye-bye.
I am. Just a quick question. If there are any resolutions, just let me know.
Yes, we will deal with that straight away. Perhaps I could just get a quick indication of which members are able to be back at their computers.
I am, Chair. Thank you.
I'm also present, Chairperson.
Myself is present, Chair.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, honourable members. Members, the next item on our agenda is that of resolutions or actions flowing from today's presentation. Any proposals or questions from your side? None. So thank you very much then. Thank you, Ms. Nikak. Would you then please first flight the minutes of the 28th of February? These minutes were circulated last week. If you could scroll down slightly. That was the meeting we devoted to the Western Cape Biodiversity Act. Honourable members, thank you. As I've indicated, it was circulated previously. Can I just get an indication whether we can adopt these minutes? Honourable America?
Chairperson, I move that we adopt.
Thank you very much. So I see Honourable Maran is also unmuted.
Was I present, Chair? I've missed that part. If yes, then I want to say
you were.
A second.
Thank you. There you are. Seconded and adopted. Thank you very much. Ms. Niekerk, can we move on to the minutes of the 15th of March? Thank you. I believe there were two meetings on that day where we dealt with the budget. Thank you. First vote number 9 on environmental affairs and development planning. Thank you so much. Can I get an indication of whether we can adopt those minutes?
I move that we adopt, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable America.
Second, Chair.
Honourable Maran. Thank you so much. Then the second meeting of that day dealt with vote number 11, agriculture. You will recall those were meetings in person in a very, very hot committee room. Thank you. Can we scroll down to the bottom, Ms. Niekerk? Honourable America, can we adopt those minutes?
Yes, Chair, I move that we do.
Thank you so much. Honourable Maran, I see you're unmuted.
Second, Chair.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, honourable members. Which brings us to the quarterly report. That is for the first quarter, January to the end of March. And congratulations to Ms. Niekerk for having that so quickly on our table. It's quite a lengthy document, 12 pages, honourable members. I trust you were able to go through it. I did go through it with a fine comb, so I trust that I'm happy with it. Yeah, please pause for a moment there, perhaps at the attendance. That's the one thing that sometimes changes. Honourable members, if you would also allow me to really say thank you very much for excellent attendance. We've had these 3 meetings. Obviously, Honourable August and Honourable Marais are alternating between environmental affairs and agriculture. That is why sometimes you will just see a little line there. But really, our attendance, I believe, as a committee has been excellent. So congratulations and thank you for that. Ms. Nikak, you can scroll down further. That is the report on the cluster visit and everybody that joined us there. The dates of our meetings. Good, thank you very much for that. There you see our remaining budget. We still have a little bit of money left from the adjusted budget. I am concerned, honourable members, about the upcoming financial year and all the legislation that is coming our way and the costs associated with public participation, but that is not for this report, that is going forward. Again, can I get an indication of your support or not for us to adopt this quarterly report? Again, Honourable America, thank you very much.
I move that we adopt, Chair. Thank you.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Which brings us to our last document to consider now, and that is the tracking document as at today's date.
Chairperson, this is a very long document. I trust members had a chance to go through it. It's the committee decisions for the financial year.
Correct. That's for the full year, 22 pages.
Correct.
Honourable members, I'm not going to ask Ms. Nikak to scroll through it because I don't think it would be sensible in the limited time. Again, if we could get an indication of any input or whether you agree, Honourable Maran.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I went through it, not through the whole document, but most of it, and I see some have been closed and some is still open. Chair, that we just agree that in terms of those are open, that we are keeping posted in terms of that. Yeah, that's basically mine. But yes, I want to. Yes, that we adopt.
Okay, thank you very much. Just for correctness first, thank you very much. There's a proposal that we adopt. We don't need a seconder, but can I just get an indication, Honourable America?
A second, Chair. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So that document has also been adopted. Honourable members, all of us that are still on this meeting as members, we have been invited to be part of the study group visiting California. Today's topic was, in a sense, also to prepare us for any debates, as the delegation from California previously indicated that they would love to learn also from our South African experience when it comes to droughts and climate change. And obviously, we want to exchange ideas with them in that regard. In the meantime, I've heard that in some parts of California, they've experienced flooding, etc. So it's going to be interesting. But Ms. Nikak, perhaps if you wouldn't mind just telling us what is the latest in terms of our visa applications, the flight bookings, etc.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Chairperson. The flight bookings have been confirmed and the tickets have been issued. The accommodation in Sacramento has been confirmed and vouchers have been issued, as well as the accommodation in San Francisco. Members have not seen a draft program yet because it is draft and those meetings are still being confirmed with DIRCO as well as with the embassy, our embassy that's based in Los Angeles. But a program will be circulated as soon as those meetings are confirmed. The visa application process, we've all applied for the visas. Visas have been paid for. The date that Ahmad has sent through for us to go and appear at the consulate's office is the 4th of May, I think at 7 o'clock that morning. So we will then do that. Other than that, Chairperson, the allowances and that sort of thing can only be confirmed closer to the time. But a request has gone through to our human resources, our people management section. so that they know what the draft program looks like, how many days will be away in order to do the calculation for the subsistence and travel allowance. And that's all the information I have at the moment. If there are any questions, members are free to ask. What did come through today was, I think members would have received an MS Teams invitation to a briefing session by James Retief and Ahmad on the trip, which I think was scheduled for a week prior to departure. I believe the Deputy Speaker has now suggested that that meeting be moved to the 25th of April. I've not had a chance to chat to the chairperson about it yet, but I just make mention of it here. The 25th of April, in fact, is the date of this committee's next meeting. So I would maybe propose, chairperson, if all is in agreement, that we have that briefing for an hour as part of this committee meeting, seeing that all the delegation is basically this committee, as well as Ms. Maseko. Thank you.
Indeed, I think that's an excellent proposal, and thank you for alerting us to that. Honourable members, any questions from your side?
Yeah, meaning that that meeting of the 25th will be physical?
Chairperson, I would assume it would be virtual.
Virtual
Yes.
is our default. Thank you very much. Then can I just ask Ms. Nikak, in terms of vaccination certificates?
Yes, we do need our vaccination certificate. So members must please just download that and then print it out so that I can include that in the pack that we're putting together for members. So in this pack, you will have your flight tickets, your accommodation vouchers, travel insurance, vaccination certificate, and the visa when we get it.
Good, thank you. Honourable members, I can just say I did express my concern that our interview is only scheduled for a week before we leave. And apparently Mr. Patience has sent a request to the American Embassy. This date was allocated, can I call it, automatically by the system, but we are going to try and get it somewhat earlier because I wouldn't like us to only receive our visa at the very, very last minute before we must get onto the plane. It happened to me last year and caused me a lot of grey hair, as you will be able to see. So, please note the date of the 4th, I believe, but that might also change. Good. Thank you very much then, honourable members. Anything else from your side? If not, I want to say thank you very much. Thank you for your participation, the interest shown in our topic today, your support. And yes, we look forward to our next meeting on the 25th. And in the meantime, a warm word of thanks to Ms. Nikak for her enormous work behind the scenes to make this happen. Also for the documentation that she so diligently prepared. And also then to our ICT staff. I see Mr. Hassam is still on the line. Thank you very much. Without your support, we would not have been able to do our work. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.